Some stunning details are being revealed in a new book, War, it's called, by Bob Woodward. And I honestly find as interesting as the big Trump news, the behind the scenes of Biden's dealings with these foreign conflicts that have been present while he's been in office, and sort of the unfiltered Biden that is observed. So we'll get to that. But first, a big part of the news is about phone calls that Trump has been having with Putin since he left office. After leaving office, he's on the phone apparently 7 times with Putin. Why? What are you talking about? What is going on there? Mediaite reports 7 craziest details to emerge from new Bob Woodward book about Biden, Trump, and Putin. And let's jump forward to the Trump news, and then we'll go back and review some of this. Trump stayed in touch with Putin. Number 4 is after leaving office. Former President Donald Trump had a very different relationship with Putin, and 2 apparently engaged in private calls after Trump left office. In one scene, Woodward recounts a moment at Mar-a-Lago where Trump tells a senior aide to leave the room so he could have what he said was a private phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Unless commissioned by the sitting president, there's really no reason for a former president to be directly communicating with not just foreign leaders, but adversarial foreign leaders. According to Trump's aide, there have been multiple phone calls between Trump and Putin, maybe as many as 7 in the period since Trump left the White House in 2021. Woodward asked Trump aide Jason Miller whether Trump and Putin had spoken since he left the White House, and the reaction was, quote, not that I'm aware of. Very confident. So before going further, it's really tough to talk about these things when we only have a little bit of information, because one of the things that gets people into trouble and gets falsehood spreading so rapidly is rampant conspiracy theorizing and speculation. And so I'm trying to be very mindful of not going there and just going off of what we know. It's difficult to do so because there's such a big question mark. What are they talking about? Is this surely playing a role in why Trump is so against clearly specifying that he wants Ukraine to win, wants Ukraine to defend their country, and wouldn't just give away huge chunks of Ukraine to Russia if he were president? What promises are being made, if any? An example is sort of what comes to mind is the controversy with Reagan while Carter was president. Is there some promise to Trump of exacerbating and elongating this conflict, even as Putin sees his own failures for the purposes of Trump's electoral chances? This is just, I'm just asking questions so that we all think this. I don't know if that's the case, okay? I don't. I'm genuinely working through what would these phone calls be about, and we don't know what they were about, so we won't assert anything. But a lot of questions come to mind, and what we know is this is wildly inappropriate without knowing at all what was said, which could go into terrible territory. I won't use the word, but violating one's duty to their own country sort of things, to Trump thinking he can negotiate something and it just doesn't go anywhere. There's a big range, and we just don't know, but we don't even need to know as much as I want to say this is inappropriate, this is horrible, and it goes against what a former president should feel is their responsibility and duty. Other parts of this, Lindsey Graham said that going to Mar-a-Lago is a little bit like going to North Korea. Everybody stands up and claps every time Trump comes in. Pitiful. Also alarming was how Graham described Trump to Woodward on the record. As Trump framed his presidential campaign around fear, Woodward writes that Graham said of the former president, Trump is becoming more erratic. These court cases, I think they would rattle anybody. Then it's other interesting anecdotes, one being that Saudi Arabia the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had a burner phone with Trump 45 written on it. And apparently he just has a bag of burner phones that he used. Some to call Trump, then Jake Sullivan, and other people, presumably. Just kind of strange. Then moving on to the Biden part of this, which is really interesting as well. While we get into that, please do make sure you've clicked the subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's start with Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu's engagements with Biden. We've heard of this tension before as the war in Gaza has been going on. At one point, Biden said, "What's your strategy, man?" Biden asked Netanyahu during an April phone call, Woodward reports. And then Netanyahu said, "We have to go into Rafah." And Biden said, "Bibi, you've got no strategy." At one point saying, after Israel went into Rafah, "He's an effing liar." Biden's quoted as saying. And then Biden directly confronted Netanyahu and said, "Bibi, what the F?" In July, after an Israeli airstrike killed a top Hezbollah military commander and 3 civilians in Beirut, according to Woodward. A bunch of interesting things about Ukraine that we're learning, and how months before Russia invaded Ukraine, U.S. intelligence was pretty certain that they were going to, and we're trying to convince Zelensky it's going to happen. And Zelensky was thinking, nah, I don't think so. They're always beating their chest. And obviously U.S. intelligence ended up being correct, but good thing they took it so seriously, so that even though Zelensky had a hard time believing it, once it happened, the U.S. and our allies were ready to support Ukraine. And some of this is just, it seems like it's coming out of a fictionalized film or something with how dramatic it all is, but this is the real world. It was an astonishing intelligence coup, Woodward writes, from the crown jewels of U.S. intelligence, including a human source inside the Kremlin. It was as if they had secretly entered the enemy's commander's tent and were hunched over the maps, examining the number and movement of brigades and the entire plan sequence on the multi-front invasion. And before Putin invaded Ukraine, Biden had a call that I haven't discussed yet. I don't know if this has ever been reported on, with Putin. And it was a hot 50-minute call that became heated. And at one point, Putin raised the risk of nuclear war in a threatening way. And then Biden responded by reminding Putin that's impossible to win a nuclear war. It does talk about Harris going to Zelensky and saying, it's going to happen, be prepared, and trying to convince him that it was actually real and U.S. intelligence was correct. There was at one point a 50% chance that Russia would use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, is my presumption. And based on the alarming new intelligence reports, the White House believed there was a 50% chance Russia would use a tactical nuclear weapon. And then this quote is wild. Our defense secretary, the U.S. defense secretary, Lloyd Austin, was talking on behalf of Biden and the administration with the defense minister of Russia, and says about the use of tactical nuclear weapons, if you did this, all the restraints that we have been operating under in Ukraine will be reconsidered. This would isolate Russia on the world stage to a degree you Russians cannot fully appreciate. And then the defense minister of Russia said, "I don't take kindly to being threatened." And Lloyd Austin said, "Mr. Minister, I am the leader of the most powerful military in the history of the world. I don't make threats." So Scaring gives us some insight into what these behind the scenes discussions look and sound like. One other anecdote is that Biden feels, I think there's some reason to feel this way, that Obama didn't react strongly enough to the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia, the invasion of Crimea by Putin, and that does play a role in where we are now. It writes, ahead of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Biden complained that Obama didn't do enough to stop Putin in 2014 when the Russian leader invaded Crimea. They effed up in 2014, Biden said to a friend. That's why we're here. We effed it up. Barack never took Putin seriously. We did nothing. We gave Putin a license to continue. Well, I'm revoking his effing license. And this is what I'm talking about when we say the importance of supporting Ukraine is about now and also years from now. this aggression has been demonstrated to be indefinite on the part of Putin if we don't teach him a lesson otherwise through the means that will prevent us from getting into direct war. So the way we teach him a lesson can't be declaring war on Russia for obvious reasons. But Ukraine defending themselves, defending their sovereign country, and doing so in a way that can prevent Putin from thinking this is something he can keep doing, might be our only option towards peace going forward and preventing aggression going forward. Biden calls Trump an effing a-hole a lot, apparently. And then he called George W. Bush after the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And Bush responded to all the disastrous parts of that, saying, oh boy, I can understand what you're going through. I got effed by my intel people too. I will be fascinated to read this book when it comes out on October 15th, Against War by Bob Woodward. So many details that are riveting and consequential. And we come back to one of them being that Trump is having semi-regular calls with Vladimir Putin, according to this reporting. And what is the substance of those calls? What do you think? We are all speculating, but I'm curious to hear what you think. You can tell me in the comments and get the bonus show by clicking the join button below.